MRCT Center podcast. We are the Multi-Regional Clinical Trial Center of Brigham and Women's Hospital and Harvard. Our mission is to engage diverse stakeholders to define emerging issues across all stages of global clinical trials and to create and implement ethical, actionable, and practical solutions. Hello. Welcome to our podcast series on Trials Beyond Borders, Building Representative Clinical Trials Worldwide. I'm Willie-Anne DeCormier-Plasky, a program director leading our representation and research efforts at the MRCT Center. I will be your moderator today for our discussion on planning for diversity and inclusion in multi-regional clinical trials from a sponsor's perspective, and I'm joined by Raquel Bruton, an Associate Director, Clinical Trial Diversity Portfolio Lead at Biogen. We're so happy to be here today, and welcome, Raquel. Would you like to say a little bit about yourself?
Yes, thank you, Willie-Anne, and thank you for the opportunity to join in on this very needed discussion. My name is Raquel Bruton, and I've been with Biogen now for 9 years. I started my work with the MRCT, I think back in 2018, and I haven't looked back, so happy to be here.
Wow, it's so great to have you here. And just so to start our discussion on clinical trials worldwide, I just wanted to ask you a little bit about how Biogen is operationalizing representation and research on the ground and diversity on the ground, particularly in trials that include countries outside of the United States.
Yeah, no, I'm thankful for that question. And Biogen has been committed in the space, quite honestly, even before me joining in 2018, where we were taking a really focused look on our global trials. And I think for today's discussion, I would like to use the country of Brazil because when we're planning out our clinical trials, we have the information and the demographics for the US, obviously, but we wanted to think broader. And we have worked with our country affiliates in Brazil to lay the foundational work with how we would execute our sometimes, complicated trials. They're not straightforward. And we have a great team there. Initially, when you're working with the CRO has, set time frame on when, we would think we would get approval in that country, how long it would take once we got approval from the government to site approval. And at first, when you're looking at the timelines, it would seem daunting because it would be, it may take 14 months to get up and running. And so sometimes decisions can be made where we really don't have that much time. So thankfully to our team there, when we initially started conducting some of our trials in Brazil, the time frame was about 14 months, and we've seen that we've brought it down to 3 months, which has been amazing because we are getting the opportunity to work on a local level with sites for them to get to know us, build trust, and really continue that community, that region focus that we're desiring.
Really amazing. I mean, to go from 14 months down to 3 months takes an enormous amount of work and
Yeah.
coordination.
Yes.
And I'd just like to ask you a little bit more about that. I mean, what do you think were sort of the strengths the team that you had there, the CROs, the folks that you worked with had to kind of leverage that, identify what the challenges were and then to, leverage their expertise to make the process smoother?
Yeah, no. So actually, to be specific, we and what was cited by one of our country affiliates, Giovanni, is that he focused on direct communication with the health authority. So first establishing that line of communication, right? They have a place, they have a key person, contact person that they can reach. And then he went on to establish pre-meetings in which there's a introduction of, this is a compound that we're going to be proposing, this is its mode of action, really working to bring all of the approvers that would normally see this protocol and the information at hand so that when the study is formally submitted, they have already had the opportunity to ask those pivotal questions for us to have time to get everyone aligned and on the same page. And that definitely made an impact. It was funny when I was talking to my colleague Giovanni, he said, the US Embassy had invited 3 general managers, drug companies, and Biogen was one of them that they invited. And that was as a direct result of us taking the time to build that relationship.
Points about communication and building relationships are so important, and particularly when we're going into new environments where people may have different expectations or, different ways of working. And I just like to learn a little bit about how you kind of think about when you start in a country like Brazil, how you think about understanding and listening to the communities there and to the sites. Like, how do you sort of go about that process so that you have this kind of really good set of networks and people that really, are in it together?
Yeah, what we found out was with much of our initiatives, whether it's in Australia, Brazil, the UK, Canada, is that our employees who work in those regions, they're from those regions, they're tapped into the communities, they understand the sites. They have been the ones that have been the catalyst in terms of what we would focus on within those countries. It would almost start as like a grassroots kind of idea, but then blossoms into a fully developed strategy on how to really build out and sustain what was identified. So what we tend to do is really listen to our employees that are in those regions, the areas of the gaps that are notified, that are identified, and how can we best support that employee in that region to really bring about lasting change. And so that's how it's come about, and it has worked. And it's nice using that model because I feel it's more organic and it's more authentic in the sense that you have someone who has identified something that they deem to be important and critical, or something that's missing in the environment we're working on. And so they have the drive, they have the enthusiasm, and that's what really makes things work when you really have a heart connection to making a particular change.
So true. I mean, you really need people who are engaged and invested. And, as you said, I think a lot of our jobs are really to provide that kind of support for change. You had mentioned that the change that was happening in Brazil, and elsewhere is really an organic kind of process. And I wanted to ask a little bit about how that may or may not have grown in Brazil. I'm assuming you started with maybe one or a couple of trials, and that's probably grown since then. So I just wanted to ask you a little bit about sort of where you were and where you kind of come from there.
Yeah, so we've grown from one trial when we started out. And I believe if I last look at the metrics, I think I had reported it to you in our last discussion.
I think you said 14, something like that.
Yeah, checking my notes, up to 14 studies. So, this has just been amazing to us. And that really is as a direct result of our commitment to growing the work that we've done there, and showing our commitment, not just through words but by actions. You can see through the numbers that we're staying and becoming more involved in the community.
And I would think that also probably the number of sites has grown that you're working with, like over time, to be able to increase the number of trials. I was just wondering if you had any sort of insights there in terms of how you look at new sites, to help understand not only to broaden the reach of who can access the trials, but to understand what might be a good fit in a new environment.
Yeah, we want to make sure that we aren't setting our sites up to fail. We definitely want to choose sites that we can support and support in the long run. And that takes some commitment to working to help the sites grow right along with us growing, because sites, their resources on a site level, they may need to train folks. So we just don't want to use centers just for one purpose. We want to build that relationship, make sure that the site staff is growing and knowledgeable in the rules and the regulations, and continue to bring new studies to the sites to, support our ongoing collaboration.
I'm going to pick up on something you said a little while ago about not only sites in Brazil, but also potentially in other countries like in the UK or in Australia. And something I know that folks have been grappling with is diversity. What does diversity mean? Like outside of the US, we have certain specific kind of conceptualizations in the United States around what diversity is, and it's usually labeled as race and ethnicity more so than other aspects of diversity, and along certain racial and ethnic categories. But I'm curious, like when you go into a country like Brazil or Australia, they may have different priorities for what they consider diversity, whether it's income level, educational level, it could be gender, it could be the categories, or categories is a poor word, but the racial categories that people use that you want to focus on for inclusion. I'm just wondering sort of how do you start to have that discussion with countries where they may not have the same conceptualization or priorities as the United States?
Yeah, I think that's an important distinction to make because it's really about our lens and our view, and not taking that and assuming that that's everyone's lens, because it's not. It takes consideration and really working with our country affiliates to understand who are the underserved, who are the underrepresented. Is it gender? Is it socioeconomic? Because we all know that race is a social construct. Other folks, is it a group, a large influx of other ethnic groups that have come into the country, that have stayed and that are part of that country? You even look at Germany. There's a large Turkish population there. Are the informed consents and in the language for those patients? That's diversity. We can't keep using the our lens of where we're situated to assume that everyone else, that we want to go ahead and try to, the word, categorize folks, because the world is bigger than where we're sitting. And so that's what we do. We ask questions, we do the research to make sure that the participants that will enter our trial are really inclusive of who the population is and who the intent to treat will be. And that should be the guiding focus. Do they have equitable access just as the next person? And if they don't, what can we do to address that?
Those are wonderful points. I'm just curious a little bit when you say intent to treat, could you explain what you mean by that?
Yeah.
Intent to treat for that condition?
Intend to treat for that, for the condition. So within our industry language, when a protocol is developed, you're making a statement on who it is that this drug is intended for. Who is it intended to treat? And so if it is intended for a certain population, a group, subsection, then are those participants, all of them that are eligible, do they have access to this trial? And if we can't reasonably answer that question, then we need to look and see where are the gaps. How can we bring in those participants that could be on the fringes, that could be missed? That's what I mean.
So one of the things I wanted to ask about is that in the last few months, the MRCT Center released a model template for diversity action plans and also a roadmap for working in other countries. And sort of the roadmap goes through kind of this very high level, kind of what are your organizational priorities and country priorities and regulatory environment, to kind of going through thinking about the ethics of, why you're doing this work and why you're choosing specific sites. And then really getting down towards driving towards then trying to figure out the specifics of your diversity action plan and the enrollment and everything like that. And I was just curious, within the work that you've done to operationalize within your own, SOPs and other pieces of work, what kinds of things from this global roadmap or from your experience in trying to operationalize this work do you think are really kind of important, in terms of planning?
Oh, well, I love the global roadmap because with my newly created position, it gave me a starting point to have my discussions with internal team members about here's really high level, and then here's where we want to go, and here's the path along that journey. And having that roadmap was just essential because one, we as industry folks, we talk to each other. This isn't our first rodeo with clinical trials, and we don't have to reinvent the wheel here. Here we took, with the MRCT, taking the time to build this roadmap. I was able to use it and really have fruitful discussions. I had a visual when sitting with key stakeholders within different departments of the company to give them an overview of the why, the what, the when, the how. And the roadmap was essential in keeping that conversation going and on track. So it was wonderful. That's how I use it.
That's good to hear. There's so many folks. I mean, we're so grateful to everyone who gave their insights into developing it. And, it really is a work in progress, I think, as we all learn
Mhm.
through conducting trials, in countries outside the United States and really learning from each other and learning from communities on the ground, where we need to kind of continue to make change and drive
Yeah.
forward. I wanted to give you an opportunity if you have a specific question or something that you think is important that you'd like to convey before we wrap up our discussion.
Yeah, I love the mission of the MRCT. When I was invited to join to meet on a quarterly basis with industry professionals I would not be in regular contact with, was literally a diving in the rough. It was just that you didn't feel like you were cooking your own soup. You could work together. You could drive the work forward faster. You could have support of your industry colleagues. And we need to do that more because ultimately we're here to try to do the best we can for folks that are out there that need our medicines, regardless of who is producing what. That's the ultimate gain. That's the gift that we get to do in terms of having purpose in our life and our work. And it's just amazing when we can take this journey together. We know that much of what we have to do in life is always easier when we share the load together. So Biogen supporting the MRCT is just a no-brainer for us. It is good work.
Thank you so much. And I love your analogy on soup. It's probably my favorite thing to cook because you can make so many different kinds and you can put
Right.
anything into it. And we can make something that's rich and just wonderful and they can feed a crowd,
You
right?
can, you can just add
So
another potato to the
that's
pot.
right. Another seat at the table. Come on over. We've got soup on. So I just want to thank you so much, Raquel, for sharing your time today and these amazing insights. You have such a wealth of experience, and it's just been so lovely to talk to you.
Great. It's a pleasure speaking to you and a pleasure working with the MRCT.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Since 2009, the MRCT Center has been an independent, pre-competitive convener engaging diverse stakeholders from industry, academia, patients and patient advocacy groups, nonprofit organizations, and regulatory agencies to deliver ethical, actionable, and practical solutions for the global clinical trial enterprise. Our resources are freely available at mrctcenter.org. Follow us on LinkedIn and sign up to receive our monthly newsletter on our website. Finally, please like and subscribe to this podcast channel. We really look forward to many exciting discussions to come. Thank you for listening.